You're listening to the X-Zone Radio Show live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network. Visit us online at
www.xzone-radio.com.
The X-Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and to all our affiliates now joining us here on the Talkstar Radio Network, welcome. And you know what? Over the last hour, we were talking to Dale Walker, or Dalton Walker, about this rock that he found. And he, for some reasons, believe it has radioactive power. It can zap insects out of the sky. It emanates these strange rays of light. However, he sent it to NASA. He has sent it to all these government agencies. And the gist I get from the letters that we have posted at www.xzone-radio.com/Dalton.htm is that he has been a pain to these people. And they've just gotten totally fed up and said, hey, listen, we want nothing more to do with you. We've said that there is nothing strange about your rock. And for him to take the word of a Canadian scientist, and I don't care if he's a Canadian scientist or a scientist from Tibet or anywhere else in the world, if he's to take the word of a scientist who has not examined the rock or examined whatever it is he has, how can this person say with any professionalism or credibility that the tests were not performed properly on this rock based on just the information that Dalton supplied him without him actually seeing the rock and making his own tests? As I said before we went to the break, I do not give this story any credibility. I gave Dalton the benefit of the doubt, and I will keep the information that he sent us posted at www.xzone-radio.com/Dalton.htm for you, the X-Zone Nation, to investigate. And if you have any other people that you would like to get them to check it out, please send me an email. Tell me what you think. My email address is very simple, xzone@talkstarradio.com. This hour we're going to be talking about prison profiteers. Now, Prison Profiteers brings together a formidable array of lawyers, prisoners, journalists, and advocates to provide a unique look at who exactly is benefiting from a mass imprisonment Prison Profiteers takes a reader on an investigative journey behind the bars of our nation's prisons to the front lines of its mass incarceration crisis and into the realm of its financially motivated private investors. The United States, with just 5% of the world's population, is responsible for incarcerating an astounding 25% of the world's inmates. Thanks to 30 years of mass incarceration, the number of people in state and federal penitentiaries has dramatically increased from an estimated 300,000 to 2.3 million. The numbers are shocking, yet while much research has focused on social issues that surround incarceration in the U.S., until now little attention has been given to the individuals and commercial enterprises that profit from prisons and their related services. When we come back from this 2-minute commercial break, Paul Wright is going to be joining me. He is the founder and the editor of the Prison Legal News, an independent monthly magazine that reports on the criminal justice system, and he is also co-editor of Prison Nature. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone, and we're talking about prison profiteers in this hour of the X-Zone, live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, exclusively on the Talkstar Radio Network. Don't go away. You're listening to the X-Zone Radio Show live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network. Visit us online at
www.xzone-radio.com.
Welcome back, everyone. We're talking this hour to Paul Wright. He is the co-editor of Prison Profiteers. It is published by New Press. And they've taken an investigative look at the physical consequences of mass incarceration, tracing more than, are you ready for this, 186 billion annual U.S. tax dollars intended for public goods to the various private prison companies, churches, investment banks, guard unions, and medical corporations that benefit from the 1 out of every 137 Americans who are in prison today. Prison Profiteers documents one of the biggest transfers of the wealth in American history, and how it operates in conjunction with mass imprisonment, the biggest and most thoroughly implemented social experiment in American history. And Paul Wright, welcome to the X-Zone.
Hi, Rob. Thank you for having me on your show.
I'll tell you something, Paul. When you look at the figures, from 300,000 to 2.3 million inmates, and then you look at the amount of money, who says crime doesn't pay on both sides of the fence?
Well, and that's exactly it. There's a lot of money to be made from, I guess a better term for it would be the crime control industry, and that's what we have here in the United States.
Paul, what does the term privatization mean in the prison system?
Basically what it means is turning over core government functions, such as running of police from policing functions.
Mm-hmm.
We see this in Iraq, for example, with the privatization of even military functions. But the core thing that we're looking at is a privatization of prison functions. And this includes, there's companies in the United States that do everything from build prisons to operate them, to more specialized things such as just providing healthcare services, commissary services, telephone services, and stuff like that. So pretty much it's almost the divvying up of the governmental services pie for a very handsome profit by private companies.
All right, so how did the move from to privatize prisons and prison industries arise?
Well, actually, like a lot of things, this isn't anything new. This is kind of almost a Back to the Future thing. In the United States, up until the 1920s, a lot of prisons were privately operated or run. And we had what was called the convict lease system, whereby states would literally rent out or sell their prisoners to private companies for their labor. In other words, the companies would pay the states, $5, $10 a day for the labor of the prisoners, and in exchange, they would get the prisoners' labor, and they were also responsible for the prisoners' well-being. Well, and in fact, this was pretty widespread. The railroads and the road system in the southern United States after the Civil War was largely built using this type of prison slave labor. And the system largely ended in the 1920s because of the corruption, the brutality. Some reports from the time document that the average lifespan of a prisoner under the convict lease system was around 5 years, because basically for the companies there was no incentive to provide medical care or treat them well. And I think the axiom from the time was, if one dies, get another one. So prison privatization pretty much fell from favor after the 1920s, and during the Great Depression there was certainly a lot more resistance from unions and businesses that had been badly affected and impacted by these prison privatization practices. So pretty much prison privatization was pretty much dead in the United States up until the early 1980s, when a guy named Dr. Krantz and another guy named Fred Beasley decided to found Corrections Corporation of America. And that was kind of almost a renaissance of the modern American private prison movement.
Now, isn't Wackenhut somewhere in there as well?
Yes, Wackenhut decided, after seeing how much money Corrections Corporation of America was making, Wackenhut decided to get into the prison business in the late 80s, and they went through some corporate, they got bought out by a Danish group called Group 4 in, let's see, I think it was around 1999 or 2000. Anyways, and part of what this Danish security company, what they did was they spun off the prison division of Wackenhut. So they only wanted the security guard portion of it. And so what was Wackenhut Corrections was spun off into its own independent company. Today they're called Geo Corporation, and they're based in Florida. But they're an independent company. They're no longer affiliated with Wackenhut.
Now, Paul, why is private prison necessarily a bad idea?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily so much that the idea is a bad one. It's like everything else. It's more in the implementation. It's how it's been implemented. And so far, the track record of the private prison industry, at least here in the United States, has been it's been a pretty bad one. And for a variety of reasons, the big claim, the central claim of the prison privatization companies is that they can perform the functions cheaper than the government can. And it could well be. Maybe they can maybe they can lock people up cheaper than the government can. But the thing is that the difference between what they charge the government to lock people up and what it actually costs them to lock people up is known as their profit margin. So taxpayers don't actually realize a better, they don't realize any type of savings or a better return on their money. And the interesting thing is the only countries in the world where prison privatization today is even really on the agenda are pretty much the English-speaking countries of the United States, England, and to a smaller extent Australia, New Zealand. South Africa has dabbled with it. Canada made one recent experiment with it, with a super jail around Toronto, and that pretty much ended in failure. And the thing is that in many parts of the world, the prison privatization issue is not seen as a human rights issue. It's seen as a labor issue. And one of the reasons for this is that where the private prison companies really make their money is by shortchanging the staff. They understaff their prisons, which leads to a lot of safety issues. You have prisoners and staff who wind up getting beaten, raped, killed, whatever. There's escapes, there's riots, and it's all due to understaffing. And the other thing is that they don't pay their staff very well. To give you an example, a prison guard in a state like Connecticut might start out at $50,000 a year. Prison guards in California are starting out at around $50,000 a year. prison employees who are working for private prison companies, on the other hand, are starting out at $8, $8.50, $9 an hour.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and it's basically, okay, you can work at Walmart or you can work for Corrections Corporation of America. And some of the things they also share is that, like the Walmart employees, but unlike their state or federal prison guard counterparts, the guards that are working for CCA and GO and these other companies, they're not getting a pension plan, they're not getting health care benefits, and basically these are some pretty core issues. And that's why these private prison companies are able to basically make a lot of money. And they claim they can run their operations cheaper than the government can, but basically they just pocket the difference, and that's how they make their money.
What kind of prison guard can you get for $8 an hour, though?
Well, that's part of the problem, is even when you can get them, you can't keep them. And that's why training and turnover are extremely high in private prisons. It's also one of the reasons that here in the United States, the private prison industry is pretty much concentrated south of the Mason-Dixon line in the so-called right-to-work states. These are states where the union movement is extremely weak. As a practical matter, none of the private prison companies employ unionized prison guards for that very reason. So they're union busters. They don't. Any efforts at organizing by prison guards is pretty much met with, pretty fierce union busting tactics, and that is basically the people they wind up hiring are people who generally don't have much else going for them as far as other options, and as soon as a better job comes along, they're out of there.
But don't we owe it to the the members of the prison community that society has placed into the custody of these prisons, whether they're run by the federal government or the state government or by the private sector, to ensure that the people who are charged with taking care of them, actually fit the bill, and it shouldn't be a matter of dollars and cents.
Yes, absolutely, and I think it also comes down to more fundamental questions of human rights. I mean, we can save for another day the discussion of who should be going to prison.
Sure.
The fact that the United States has some of the harshest sentencing practices and policies in the world. The fact that they lock up so many mentally ill people and nonviolent drug offenders and stuff like that. But let's just focus on the fact that, okay, let's take it as a given that so many people are going to prison, and what's going to happen with them while they're there. And, a core concern, I think, for everyone should be, if you're going to send people to prison, by the time they get out, they shouldn't be worse when they get out than they were when they went in. And a lot of that entails, providing some type of resources. We know, for example, in the United States that statistically, depending on the state, 60 to 80% of prisoners are functionally illiterate. So it kind of makes sense, well, let's give them some functional literacy classes.
Yes,
we know
exactly.
that 85% of prisoners have substance abuse problems with drugs or alcohol or both. It makes sense, hey, let's give them some substance abuse treatment, try to get them off drugs, which more than likely is what led to their coming to prison in the first place. And these are all, I think, pretty common sense things. I don't think too many people are going to disagree with that. But then it comes down to the thing, well, you know what? It costs money. It costs money to hire teachers. It costs money to buy some school books.
And there goes the profit margin.
And there goes the profit margin.
All right, stand by, Paul. You and I have to take a news break at the bottom of the hour. Paul Wright is our special guest, X-Zone Nation. He is the co-editor of Prison Profiteers. It's published by New Press. And when we come back from this commercial break, more with Paul Wright. We're going to be talking about prison labor and other topics of interest as the X-Zone continues live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, exclusively right here on the Talkstar Radio Network. And still to come tonight, psychic readings by the one and only Dougal Fraser. All this and more coming up. Don't go away.
Tired of losing in the casinos and being in the hole? Learn how to win at Blackjack with Blackjack for Winners. Call 1-800-214-7012, 1-800-214-7012. This is the DVD that casinos do not want you to see. According to Tommy Highland, a legendary blackjack professional, this DVD teaches an easy way to count cards and beat the casinos at their own game of blackjack. It takes only 3 easy steps. 1, basic strategy. 2, card counting. And 3, money management. It's just that easy to beat the casinos at their own game of blackjack. Order right now and you'll receive 2 instructional DVDs, 52 flashcards making basic strategy a snap, and a reference card you can take into the casinos with you. All of this for only $29.95 plus shipping and handling. Order today at 1-800-214-7012, 1-800-214-7012. Start learning to win at Blackjack today with Blackjack for Winners, 1-800-214-7012, 1-800-214-7012.
I feel young. I act young. I am young. I'm only 45. So imagine my surprise recently when I was attending my son's high school graduation ceremony and someone asked me which one was my grandchild. Did I look that old? And the answer was in the mirror. My wrinkles were adding years to my looks. I had to do something, but shots of Botox or a facelift was the last thing I wanted to resort to. Then a friend of mine introduced me to Hydroderm. Hydroderm is a proven anti-aging serum that helps reduce the appearance of wrinkles while encouraging a smooth, youthful look and feel to skin. Well, it worked. No more grandma face for me, and my husband hasn't looked at me like this in years. Well, call now for a free 14-day trial of Hydroderm, absolutely risk-free. Your free trial of Hydroderm is just a phone call away. Here's the number, 1-800-263-0613. Call now before this risk-free offer expires. 1-800-263-0613. Toll free, 1-800-263-0613.
You're listening to the X-Zone Radio Show live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network. Visit us online at
www.xzone-radio.com.
Another day's at end. Mama said.
My name is Michael Telstar, Canada's leading mentalist from Toronto, Ontario.
Hi, my name is Belinda, and you're listening to my dad, Rob McConnell, on the X-Zone.
This is Psychic Dorothy from St. Catharines, and you're listening to Rob McConnell.
Hello, my name is Holly Reeves, an astrologer from Astro For You, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X-Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Welcome to The X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Baby sister, be as kind as you can. Break it to my grandma, said that boy's wild and bad. Break it to them gently when you tell them that I won't be coming home again. 'Cause I'm running with a gun and it isn't any fun as a fugitive. Fighting for my
Wright is our special guest. We're talking about prison profiteers. And if you'd like to visit their website, it's www.prisonlegalnews.org. That's www.prisonlegalnews.org. And this segment of the X-Zone is being brought to you by Dita Wegman, who is the author of Nostradamus Dreams Interpretation Guide, Real Dreams Predicting for Your Future, The Power of the Stars, How They Move Us Humans. Visit her website at www.nostradamusdreams.com. Paul, aren't there positive aspects to prison labor?
Well, I'm not not sure. Like what? I mean, there's things that their proponents say that are positive about it, but I think that when you subject them to critical examination and you get past the suspension of disbelief, they tend not to pan out.
Well, for example, keeping idle hands busy, it gives prisoners a skill for post-prison life, doesn't it? Plus, doesn't it raise their dollar value when they hit the streets back in society, so they don't have to look at crime in order to exist?
Well, I think that's one of the things that, on paper it sounds good, but the reality is that most of the jobs that are being done in prisons are, they tend to be very low tech. They tend to be low tech, very labor-intensive, manual, low-skill labor, stuff that in general these jobs have long been exported to third-world sweatshops outside of the United States, or stuff that if it's being done in the United States, well, it's being done by prisoners or it's being done by illegal immigrants. There's really not a lot of real job skill training going on here. Some of the other issues that have come up is that by using prisoners in these jobs, it depresses wages on the outside for the non-prisoners that are doing these jobs. So literally by the time guys get out, the jobs are no longer there, or is something that you can't sustain a family on.
So, in prison, when a prisoner works, does he get paid, or is he compensated for the work that he does, or is this part of his payback to society?
Well, it depends. Virtually every state in the country in the United States has some type of law or statute requiring prisoners to work. And in some states like Texas, Florida, Mississippi, and Arkansas, for example, prisoners literally are slaves of the state. They get paid nothing. You have prisoners that are working in the fields, they may be working industrial-type operations, and they get paid absolutely nothing for their labor. And this goes back to kind of a bigger thing here in the United States, is a lot of people think that the United States abolished slavery at the end of the Civil War. Well, the United States didn't abolish slavery. In fact, it enshrined it in the 13th Amendment, which limited slavery to people that had been convicted of a crime. And this has led several courts, whenever prisoners have gone to court seeking to be paid for their labor or seeking a minimum wage, to say basically prisoners are the slaves of the state. They have no right, no entitlement to any type of pay or anything like that. And so that's kind of on the one hand. The other thing is that to the extent that prisoners are being paid for their work, in most states, prisoners are paid literally, the states that do pay the prisoners to work, they're paid literally pennies. And we document some of this in Prison Profiteers, where, for example, prisoners that are being employed by Pride, that's the prison industries company in Florida, they're being paid 20, 30, 40 cents an hour. On the other hand, the prison officials who run these corporations, these prison industries, are making $250,000 a year in salary. So in some respects, you could say that, yes, that replicates the free world workforce. But the bigger thing, though, is that prison slave labor, it's not economically feasible. The companies that set up shop using prison slave labor, even with all the subsidies they get from the government, which typically will include everything from not having to pay rent, they've got a pretty docile workforce that's forbidden to strike or organize. They don't have to pay health benefits. They don't have to pay workman's compensation. They don't have to get insurance. Even with all these benefits, they tend not to be very economically successful. They tend not to do very well in the marketplace.
So, taking all this into consideration, is there an economic impact of the prisons in major cities, and as well as in the rural communities, or is the economic imprint and impact only on the smaller communities?
I'd say that basically the impact of prison slave labor isn't so much on communities as it is on industries. And this comes up where, for example, the industrial furniture industry, for years, for the last 10 or 12 years, they've been some of the most vocal and vigorous critics of prison slave labor here in the United States, and specifically they've targeted Unicor, which is the federal prison industries. And some of the stuff that they've gone after Unicor for is that when you've got state-run prison industries, it's not just so much that you've got companies that are paying prisoners, pennies an hour to work. But the other big thing is that there's also laws on the books that require government agencies to purchase a lot of goods from prison industries before they can turn to private suppliers. And this has long been a bone of contention for a lot of industries, where you've got the furniture industry saying, hey, we can pay people at least the minimum wage or a little bit more, and benefits and workman's comp, and we can sell furniture to the government for less money than prison industries can when they pay these guys 20 cents an hour. And they've lobbied very heavily seeking to end these mandatory supplier contracts and requirements that are imposed on a lot of government agencies. And one of their arguments is that the furniture industry in particular has been heavily hit by the prison sourcing requirements, as well as the job flight to Asia, especially to China, where a lot of U.S. furniture is now made in.
How can we turn this around? How can we make it more fair? And where does all this money go?
Well, as far as talking about the money, that's a pretty good question. In some respects, I think you can call Prison Profiteers a follow the money book. And when you look at the fact that the United States, just on operating costs, just for prisons, spends around $80 billion a year to run prisons, and to put this into some perspective, California alone spends around $8 billion a year on its prison system.
Wow.
We're talking a lot of money, and where it's going is you've got 2.3 million people locked up, and you've got around 900,000 people that are directly employed by these prisons and jails. This is everything from the prison and jail guards to the nurses, the secretaries, the bureaucrats that run them, the prison officials that manage them. And these are just the people that are directly employed by the prisons and jails to actually operate them and oversee their operation. If you start talking about the people that are doing kind of the more peripheral or the more secondary stuff, the architects that build them, the doctors that work in the prisons, the people that make the razor wire, the people that make the locks, the people that make the alarm systems, and all this, that's where these billions and billions of dollars are going. And part of the problem is that whenever there's been any attempt at downsizing prison populations, all these people that have vested financial interests, they immediately come out saying, hey, you can't mess with our livelihood on this. Right before he left office, Governor Elliott Spitzer in New York was in the midst, he'd floated a proposal saying, hey, we can close some of these older prisons in New York State, and we can shut them down, and this will save us some money. And immediately you've got the prison guards, their union, and you've got legislators where these prisons are located in, all coming out saying, hey, you can't close these prisons. Our jobs depend on it. And what we've seen in the United States in the last 25, 30 years is the use of prisons as tools of economic development, where literally it's, some commentators have called it, government welfare for poor rural white communities, because that's where most prisons have been built in the United States in the last couple decades. And no one wants to see those sources of money drying up. Prisons are seen as, by some segments of society, the people that are benefiting from them, they're seen as a great thing, and, they don't want to lock up less people, they want to lock up more people.
All right, so we've got the privatization happening. Now, what do the guard unions have to say, and the other unions that are involved in the federal, state, and municipal systems outside of the private sectors?
The prison guard unions, to their credit, have been very good on the issue of prison privatization, and pretty much and across the board, they strongly oppose prison privatization because they basically, quite accurately see it as a threat to their direct economic interests. And it doesn't take, a rocket scientist to realize that, if you're working for the government and as a prison guard and you're making $40,000 a year and after a few years, you'll be making $55,000, and you've got benefits, you've got good health care benefits, you've got a pension plan where you can retire after 30 years. That's pretty good. And then you look across the street where there's a privately run prison, and guards are starting out there at $8 or $9 an hour. They have no benefits, they have no pension plan, and stuff like that. And it's, you know, that real race to the bottom is pretty apparent. That's why the guard unions have been pretty consistent about opposing prison privatization. And this is also why I mentioned earlier that the private prison industry is concentrated in the southern United States, where typically either there is no union movement or the unions are very weak. There's virtually no private prisons in any of the northern states of the United States where there are strong unions. And in California, there's only a couple of private prisons, and basically they operate. They only house federal prisoners for the federal government. They aren't housing any state or local prisoners.
Have there been any studies done to see who puts out a better prisoner when it comes time to releasing them back into society, the private or the federal?
Well, one of the studies that was done recently was on Hawaiian prisoners. Hawaii has a serious overcrowding crisis. They lock up a bunch of people, mostly drug offenders, and land is at a premium in Hawaii, so they haven't been able to build any new prisons there. But what they found is they can send them to Corrections Corporation of America-run prisons in Oklahoma and Arizona and these other places for a fraction of what it would cost to keep people locked up in Hawaii. And so they've got a couple thousand Hawaiian prisoners in Oklahoma and Arizona, which is literally thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away from their homes, their families, and their support networks. And the study they did is that they've literally, CCA is boasting a 100% recidivism rate for Hawaiian prisoners sent to the mainland and then released and sent back to the Hawaiian Islands within 3 years, which is pretty impressive. And that's kind of that's a very extreme example, but pretty much the recidivism rates, unfortunately, are very high, and they're driven by a lot of the same reasons. Is just as the government prisons aren't providing substance abuse treatment, literacy treatment, and stuff like that, the private prisons tend not to be doing it either.
So the benefit is not being passed on to the inmate.
No, there's absolutely no benefit, and that's one of the things that what we see happening a lot with the private prison industry is some of the other places where they shortchange prisoners. Is the biggest thing is on the staffing, but then everything else is, whether it's the food, the uniforms, the clothing, the hygiene items, the medical care. It just, the list just goes on. It's pretty much very bottom line driven. Any place they can save a nickel, that's what they're doing. And this is in the context that the executives of these companies. I mean, George Zolli, he's the CEO and president of Geo Corporation. I mean, the guards that work for him might be starting out at $8.50 an hour, but he's making millions of dollars a year, and so it goes for the rest of the top-tier executives in the private prison industry. They're making huge amounts of money.
All right, Paul, please stand by. We've got to take our final break for this hour. Paul Wright is our special guest, www.prisonlegalnews.com. We're talking about the book that he co-edited, Prison Profiteers. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial set as the X Zone continues right here on the Talkstar Radio Network.
Choosing someone to help guide you through deep financial waters is an important as well as very personal decision. Let me tell you good news. You have a friend in the loan business who is sincerely anxious to help you when you need it. The toll-free number, in case you ever do need it, is 1-866-464-1800. There'll be an interested, caring, and friendly voice at the other end of the line when you call Prime Pacific Capital. I know it's not every day you need advice on consolidating credit cards or getting a home loan or getting a lower interest rate, but when you do need help, that's no time to take chances. Call 1-866-464-1800 or visit www.talkstarradio.com. Call 1-866-464-1800 and introduce yourself to your friend in the money business. But don't ask for free samples. I already tried that. It doesn't work. Call 1-866-464-1800.
Whether it's the arrival of Planet X in 2012, the Earth's crazy weather cycles, our deadly global warming, Armageddon, UFOs, ETs, terrorism, the critical mass 2008 presidential elections, Dr. Jason Rand talks the talk and walks the walk. Being a twice-nominated Grammy record producer, recording artist, publisher, lecturer, UFO ET researcher and investigator, and best-selling author of The Return of Planet X, Mankind's Ongoing Legacy with a Brown Dwarf Star, Dr. Jason Rand truly does walk the walk and talk the talk. For more information on Dr. Jason Rand or to order The Return of Planet X, visit his website at www.returnofplanet-x.com or call 901-336-9660.
And where will you be in the year 2012?
With Paul Wright, who is the co-editor of Prison Profiteers. And if you'd like to get more information, visit www.prisonlegalnews.org. What do you think is going to happen with this privateers or prison profiteers? Do you think that it's going to go back to the federal system, or that more and more is going to be given over to the private sector?
Well, what's actually happened, the private prison industry, they tried to basically mount a big, when they first started out, they were focused on minimum security prisoners and kind of cherry-picking the crop of well-behaved, healthy prisoners. But that's not where the real, that isn't where the real numbers are in the American prison system. So they started expanding into medium security prisoners, and that's pretty much where they've run into their big problems of escapes, killings, riots, everything else. So they've taken some real black eyes with that. And at this point, the private prison industry is kind of stabilized at around, they hold around 7% of American prisoners. And that's pretty much where they're at. I don't really think they're going to be growing too much more beyond that. Where they've been growing massively, though, and basically it's amounted to almost a federal government bailout of the private prison industry, which was pretty much tanking in the early part of this decade due to mismanagement, bad decisions, and riots and stuff like that, is the illegal immigration market. Basically, the number of people that the U.S. government is locking up for immigration violations is increasing exponentially. Right now, there's around 30,000 people locked up for immigration violations, people in the various stages of the deportation process, and the government, through the Department of Homeland Security and ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Branch, they're dramatically increasing the number of prison cells they're going to have for immigration detention. And all this expansion is pretty much being done by the private prison industry. And that's been a huge boon to them. And as far as the population to manage, it tends to be a lot easier. It tends to be a lot easier, more docile population than convicted prisoners. And they seem to be latching onto it. In fact, some of the big things that's gotten some negative press recently is the Hutto facility in Texas that's run by Corrections Corporation of America, where they lock up entire immigrant families. Parents with their children are locked up. It's a medium security prison that's been converted to immigration detention. They call it a family facility, but you got babies in cells, babies in cribs in prison cells. And this has been a huge boon to CCA and the other companies. I think that's one of the trends that's going to keep continuing to expand.
Paul, you and I have to say so long for tonight, but I'd love to have you back in the future to continue this conversation.
Okay, anytime you're interested in criminal justice issues in the United States, feel free to call on me.
Thanks very much, Paul, and continued success in bringing all this information to the light so that the citizens know what's going on. Paul Wright, he is the co-editor of Prison Profiteers, www.prisonlegalnews.org. When we come back from the news at the top of the hour, Dougal Fraser will be with us, doing psychic readings for one and all who give us a call at 1-877-528-8255. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone on the Talk Star Radio Network. Don't go